For the first time ever, the F word made it into the global deal at COP28. That's right.
I believe we really can prevent a climate disaster and achieve zero emissions. Now, as we do that, there's two things we should keep in mind. First, we need, for the sake of justice, to help people adjust to the planet that is already warmer. The second factor that we have to keep in mind is the cold, hard truth that the world has quite limited resources available to reduce inequities. Climate change is a major threat to human welfare, but so are food insecurity, malnutrition, and infectious disease. In a world with limited resources, it may seem like we cannot make progress on climate, health, and development all at once. But nobody will be better off in a world with fewer carbon emissions if we're not solving illness, starvation, and death. So we have to make progress on all of these at the same time. And that's where innovation comes in. By focusing it in the right way, it magnifies the impact of the resources in every one of these areas. Just as we need to innovate to get to zero emissions, we need to continue to innovate in human health. I believe we can improve human welfare broadly faster than any of us have seen in our lifetime, including avoiding a climate disaster. I'm inspired by the commitments being made here. By investing in innovation that works for everyone, we won't just keep the planet livable, we will make it a better place to live.
Who should decide the future of life on Earth? That's right, the free fucking market.
So if you care about, living on planet Earth, you gotta listen to this. Because the future of life on Earth is being decided right now by people who do not share your interests. Right now, countries all across the globe have gotten together to try to solve climate change in a thing called COP28. I know it's the most boring name in the world, it doesn't make any sense, but that's what it's called. And the president of COP28 is this guy, who just happens to be a fossil fuel CEO. He runs ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, and he's gonna use the talks to pen more oil deals. And if holding climate negotiations in a petrostate and having a fossil fuel CEO to host the whole thing has big, we chose a babysitter and it's Jeffrey Epstein vibes to it, you're not wrong. Meanwhile, the Alberta government is sending hundreds of delegates to this thing, most of whom are there to promote oil and gas. They're especially going to be talking up carbon capture and storage, a miracle technology which Premier Danielle Smith herself said is costly and stupid. This is not to say that COP is entirely bullshit. There's already been an agreement on a loss and damage fund. The problem is, given the limited amount of time we have to solve this problem, that there is no agreement on, the end goal of phasing out fossil fuels. But you...
Don't worry, guys, the oil men will save us. Come to COP28. Did your dad instill in you that you're part of a superior race than other people and one of these days you're gonna get your revenge? Then you belong at COP28 with a bunch of like-minded people. Don't worry, guys, in this life, if you're a real good boy and girl, maybe in the next life you'll get to live, But you should come to COP28 now. Us oil execs really lost our way the last 200 years, but this year, we really figured it out, and you guys should trust us. Come to COP28. Shell once put Steve Donziger in house prison for 2 years because he helped the people in the Amazon get a huge payout from Shell because they polluted so much into the Amazon, they've dug up oil and then spilled it in all of their rivers and stuff. And yeah, they did such a bad job that Steve Donziger awarded them billions of dollars, and then they got a judge to put him on house arrest.
For the first time ever, the F word made it into the global deal at COP28. That's right, fossil fuels. World leaders agreed to transition away from fossil fuels at COP28 in Dubai after a historic climate change deal was approved by 200 countries this morning. For the first time in 30 years, a unanimous decision has been made to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. What does this mean? The plan is to triple renewable energy capacity globally by 2030, reduce coal use, and accelerate technologies like carbon capture and storage that can clean certain industries. What's next? Climate actions, not words. nations of the summit have agreed to the Critical Loss and Damage Fund.
If I hadn't just learned about what a freaking mess the climate finance world is, this new announcement of a loss and damage fund that came out of COP28 wouldn't give me such an ick. But it does, and here's why. In theory, a loss and damage fund is great. You know, it's where high-income countries would put money into a pot that would go to low-income countries to help them adapt to climate change. But historically, funds like this have basically just run on trust. Like, there's no tracking of where that money comes from, where it goes, how it's used, what the impact is, until now. Some very smart people over at the One Campaign has basically gathered all this data for the very first time, and the results are kind of bleak. The big thing they found is that 2/3 of climate commitments, so things like a loss and damage fund, are either not given at all, or they go to something that doesn't have anything to do with climate. And that has resulted in $343 billion that should have been going to fight climate change that just went somewhere else. And of the money that has been given, only 6.5% of it have gone to the world's 20 most climate vulnerable countries. And those are the countries that will theoretically receive this loss and damage fund. So I'm not saying that this loss and damage fund won't work and it's not a good idea. I absolutely think it's a great idea, but unless we can keep governments accountable and hold them to what they say they're going to do with accurate data, there's no way we're going to know if they actually followed through on their promises. So once all the details of this fund are hashed out and we know what each country promises they're going to give, you bet your little arse that the One Campaign is going to be tracking every last cent, because that is how we keep leaders accountable here. And we need to make sure that low-income countries are getting the support that they need for a crisis that they did not create.
And ensure the inclusion of the role of fossil fuels.
Breaking news. Man from Dubai with absolutely no ulterior motives, we promise, wants you to keep buying and using fossil fuels into the foreseeable future, which isn't very long, by the way. And of course, he's delivering this news to us from a climate emergency conference where the majority of the discussion is revolving around the fact that we are cooking and poisoning our planet past the point of no return. It's difficult to describe how incredibly frustrated I'm becoming. And to be clear, it's not just about this, but more and more it seems that every government, every official body, every institution, every man in charge is making decisions in the name of personal and short-term profit, with absolutely no regard for the future of the viability of life on this planet, or the quality of the life that currently exists here. I'm really struggling to understand why we're still allowing this. I don't get it.
This ice, which is more than 100,000 years old from Greenland's ice sheet, can now be bought in Dubai, speeding up the climate change. No, they're not.
How come? Q, I'm really interested to know how this is not contributing to climate risk, because as far as I know, this is not environmentally friendly, not financially friendly either. Does not serve UN sustainable goals, and the only beneficiaries are people who can afford a costly, wild nightlife in Dubai. To get this 100,000-year-old frozen water to a rich person's glass, you've consumed energy to break, pack, and load the ice into cargoes, transport the whole load across 7,700 kilometers in a straight line by tankers, maintain the low temperature of this ancient ice by chillers and highly isolated heavy containers, offloading to Dubai port, distribution to pubs and hotels, 24/7 operation of heavy-duty chillers consuming stupendous load of daily non-stop electrical power and even HFC refrigerants. That even adds more greenhouse gas released to the atmosphere from the very place that holds the 28th Conference of Parties to combat climate change. I can save that much energy to fight hunger, promote climate awareness, or even help people suffering from war. But all that energy for frozen water, marketed as pure ice, serving the pleasure of a sip? I ain't taking that sip even if I'm getting paid for it. Why can't the wealthy guys just take more environmentally friendly aircraft to Greenland and promote local tourism by sipping the ancient ice right where it came from? Isn't that much better for SDG 1, 7, 12, 13, 14, 17? What do you think?
COP28, the United Nations annual climate change conference, has fizzled out for another year, held this time around in Dubai of all places. Briefing documents leaked to the BBC a few weeks ago revealed that the United Arab Emirates plan to use its role as a host of these UN climate talks as an opportunity to strike oil and gas deals, but that little revelation appears to have been glossed over, ignored and swept under the rug by the world's collective media. The United Arab Emirates, of course, are amongst the world's biggest fossil fuel producers. I mean, we're better to host a virtue signalling Olympics about climate change than in a petro-state. No hypocrisy there at all. As usual, dignitaries from all over the world who love a handout and a 5-star trip at taxpayers' expense turned up on their private jets to enjoy luxury hotels, to sun themselves on the beach, and to pretend to listen to climate bilge for a few hours every afternoon. Much climate waffle was spouted, much questionable data was presented, and many countries made pledges that they have no intention of keeping. The taxpayer-funded hospitality was first class, and everyone who attended is going home fatter than when they arrived. So well done everybody, big pat on the back to us all for financing this important gathering of the world's great and good, so that they can carry on having a crack at saving the planet. Except the planet doesn't need saving, does it? The planet will sort itself out. Climate change is normal and has occurred throughout the history of the Earth, let alone the history of humanity. But they've sold it to us exceptionally well this past decade, the idea of climate catastrophe. They've managed to swindle a load of green taxes and levies out of us all, and now we're all much, much poorer as a result. They've emptied our pockets so successfully already that their next stage in saving the planet, net zero and all that, is now impossible because nobody's got any money left to pay for it. And thanks to relentless Just Stop Oil protests, with wealthy middle-class autistic students and lonely pensioners blocking the motorways and making everyone's life utterly miserable, a thoroughly abused public couldn't give a toss about climate change anymore. They're having an eye-watering amount of their paycheck thieved off them in shady taxes every month. They've been working their socks off for years, only to have their bank accounts emptied by feckless governance, to the extent that they really wouldn't care if the world turned into an enormous fireball at this point, which it won't, because the climate crisis is a massive kleptomaniacal globalist scam.
The more I hear that we're all going to drive electric cars, well, the more I want to be on the other side. See, it's always good to have an opposition. So, you go and say that you want electric cars and you don't like climate change. I'm going to say I like climate change. Let's go climate change. More CO2, bigger plants, bigger trees, bigger animals. It's great. I see it as a positive. You don't. But who gives a fuck? You're allowed to have a different opinion, aren't you? I'd like to have one. So when you go and buy an electric car, I'm going to buy another older car. I've already got two. I've got a 1997 Volkswagen Turbo Diesel 5-speed. Now that one's really producing a lot of smoke out there. I'm going to show you guys. I'll make a video where I'm dropping smoke bombs on people. Hopefully we'll get a Tesla behind us. That'll be great. And the other car I have is a 2008 Subaru Outback. Fantastic car. Love it. Love it. Eats gas a little bit, but still a great fucking car. And I'm going to get another one. Every time you guys come out with this shit, I'm going to go get more fucking cars, because I say yay to fucking climate change. More CO2. More CO2. I breathe it out. I farted too.